A couple weeks ago at Plainville Christian Church, we talked about two sisters that had an interaction with Jesus. This is found in Luke chapter 10. Jesus had gone to their house, the house of Mary and Martha. Martha prepared a meal. Mary sat at the feet of Jesus and listened to him teach. Martha was complaining to Jesus about this and said, tell my sister to come help me get everything ready and get cleaned up and take care of the stuff that needed to be done. And Jesus told her that Mary had chosen wisely, that she had done what she needed to do, that she was where she needed to be. Now that's not to condemn Martha for the job she was doing. There's a happy medium between being a Mary and being a Martha. It's not choosing one or the other, it's choosing one as a whole. Having the right times to listen and having the right times to do the work that needs to be done. There's a third person in the house of Mary and Martha that we didn't get to talk about in Luke chapter 10 because he wasn't mentioned there. The brother of Mary and Martha, a man named Lazarus. Now this story is found in John chapter 11. Now in John chapter 11 it tells us that Jesus is in Jerusalem. And word is sent to him that his friend Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, is sick. He's not doing well. Jesus tells his disciples that they need to go take care of him. They need to go see him. They need to be there for him. But they need to stay and wait. In fact, they waited 2 days in Jerusalem. Now this is only a 2-mile hike from Jerusalem to the town of Bethany, where the house of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha is. And after 2 days, Jesus tells his disciples that Lazarus has fallen asleep. They took this as meaning that he was taking a nap. That wasn't the case. Jesus said, no, he's not asleep, he's dead. Now this troubled Jesus. He was cut to the heart because his friend had passed away. So Jesus goes to Bethany. He travels with the disciples, and before they even reach the house, Martha comes out and greets him and says, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would still be alive. And he said, Martha, your brother will live again. And she said, yeah, I know. At the end of times when there's the resurrection and we all come back. And Jesus looked at Martha and said, no, I am the resurrection and I am the life. Then he sent Martha to go get Mary. And Mary came out along with the Jews that were in there comforting her. And they came to Jesus, and she talked to Jesus and told him the same thing. If you had been here, my brother, he wouldn't have passed away. The man you loved would still be alive if you had only been here. And then in John chapter 11, verse 35. This is one of my favorite verses in all the Bible growing up because it's the shortest verse. 2 words. Jesus wept. He cried. He showed emotion. Now, we don't know why he cried. Many experts have different theories on why he wept. Because a friend had passed away. Because he saw the disheartening, the emotion, the worry in Mary and Martha, and he worried for them. He could have cried because of the sin of the world that he knew was prevalent. He could have cried because he knew that in just a couple days he was going to be nailed to a tree. To me, it doesn't matter why he cried. The fact is, he did cry. He did shed a tear. He did show emotion. To me, that makes it okay for me. If the Son of Man, the Son of God, God himself in earthly form can show emotion, and so can I. Now, before we get to the rest of the story, I want to turn over to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Solomon was a wise man, a great king who made a lot of mistakes. Solomon was given the option by God. God came to Solomon and said, here's the deal. You ask me anything you want and it's yours. Tell me what you desire and I'll give it to you. And I got to think, if that was proposed to me, the possibilities would be endless. Wealth, fame, fortune, the ability to get out there and play baseball right now. But asking for wisdom probably would be the last thing that I asked for. But that's what Solomon asked for, was wisdom. And we see throughout Ecclesiastes a great deal of wisdom shown by Solomon. And here's what he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. There's a time for every emotion we have. Hurt, grief, sadness, sorrow, loss. They all come to us in different ways, shapes, and forms in different times in our lives. But I love what Solomon says there, because he tells us that all those emotions, there's a time for them. But along with that, there's a time to pick up the pieces and keep moving forward. There's a time to deal with those emotions. There's a time to handle those situations. And there's a time to get going. And that's what I love about the story of Jesus and Lazarus is Jesus wept. He cried. He shed a tear. He was full of emotion. But he had a job to do. This is what it says in John chapter 11, verse 38. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave. A stone lay against it, and Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." He could have let his emotions hold him back. He could have let the sadness and sorrow he had in his heart stop him from doing anything, but he had a job to do. There's a time to cry. There's a time to worry. There's a time to be afraid. There's a time to whatever emotion you're feeling. But there's also a time to pick up the pieces and go. Now that looks different for everybody. I'm not saying that we should all, have the quick thought and quick action of Jesus here to 1 minute be crying and the next minute doing what he needs to do. For some, it takes a while to get over our emotions. But you can't let your emotions control you. You can't let your fears control you. You can't let the issues of this world stop you from being who you're supposed to be, because we all have a job to do. We all have a calling in our life to be who we are and go where we're supposed to go. When I was growing up, there was a popular song when I was little. I had a t-shirt that had this written on it: "Don't worry, be happy." Those aren't the exact words of the Apostle Paul, but in Philippians chapter 4, he says something very similar. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And here's the kicker. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. And the God of peace will be with you. Like I said a minute ago, we all have emotions. We all have issues in our lives. We all have things going on. And right now we're living in a weird time. You turn on the news and it's fear. It's worry. It's despair. It's destruction. It's agony. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can't let those fears and those worries and those desperation moments come to us and hold us down and bind us. Like Paul said, rejoice in the Lord. Give your hope in Him. Trust in Him that He's got this figured out. And that peace of God will be with you. I want to close this morning with my favorite passage of Scripture. This is Psalm 121. It says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made the heaven and the earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. We all have emotions. We're emotional people. And I think those are a gift from God. But don't let them control you. Don't let them consume you. Don't let them take you away from who you're supposed to be. Be you. Be what God created you to be. And if you're afraid and you're worried and you're scared, walk outside. The sun is shining. Walk out at nighttime. The moon is up in the sky and the stars in the heavens. The God who put the stars and the moon and the sun and the clouds and the birds and the trees and everything that we have around us, who put all that into being just by speaking a word, is the same God who doesn't sleep, He doesn't slumber, He doesn't take a nap. He is the God that watches over you. May the peace of God be with you. I pray that you have a great week, and we'll see you again.